I'd like to thank Eric and Solar for doing our presentation for us.
Yeah, I'll say. I think one of the running jokes around the office is my volume of questions. So those of you that have met me in the past, a lot of nods. I am known for asking lots and lots of questions. So when Dan mentioned that he was going to be presenting on the integration side, I said, hey, maybe I can ask you some questions and see if we can try to present you information in that fashion and see what you think. Okay. All set? Okay, thanks. All right, so Dan, what are the integration options? And is it possible to change or revisit them when we go live?
So we have 4 different options that we use, and changing, I'm going to answer that 2 ways. One, we don't often see somebody change from one of these options to a different option, but we do see a lot of people who will start with one module, like materials planning. That's our premier, like, flagship, and then they will add on S&OP or scheduling and execution at some point. And so that integration does grow, but it doesn't generally cross platforms like we're going to go through now.
Okay.
So, so we've got 4 different options. I'm going to go through them. They're all similar in the way that the slides are laid out. So I'm going to cover that real quick, and then we'll talk through the differences between the options. So in the white, you'll see over here, it all says down here, customer security boundary. So that happens in your sites, right? You guys own the security of that. We don't necessarily touch inside of that. In the blue, of course, is what we own, right? And so we've got SOC 2 compliance through everything. Wayne and AJ do a great job of making sure that everything works smoothly and seamlessly every time, right, Wayne? Every time. So in all of these, right, to the right-hand side is everything that goes on in Intuiflow. So we've got, you know, the MRP stuff going on and the scheduling stuff, any reporting, if there's output to some kind of, like if you guys have your own, we can output to it like a data place, right? If you guys just want to store data, and there's ways you can do that yourself. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So in this case, we're talking about self-service. So several clients in the room are what we would call self-service, where they build their own integration, either through our tool, which we call ADX Remote, formerly an artist known as R+ Pusher, or they will use their own middleware. So like one common one is Postman, right? We actually use that on my team for testing. And so they will take CSVs from their system or JSON files, and using whatever middleware they're using, push that into Intuiflow. All right. Of course, you're going to accept some orders and make some changes, and then that gets pushed back on a schedule. But it's all managed by the client IT. So there's a little bit more lift on the client organization to do that, because you've got to extract and do any transformations before you send that through that middleware. But you've got complete control of the process, right? Timing of the runs. You know, if there's an issue, it's easy for the client to determine what's going on. So, right, Trey, if something breaks down in your integration, you're going to know where to go look, right? But very heavy on the IT resources of the client. There's really nothing for us. Oops, sorry. Nothing for us to do in that case. We give a little advice along the way about how you integrate with like R+ Pusher if you're using that, and how to best leverage that. But if there's an issue with the integration, we can't be of a whole lot of use there. Make sense?
Makes sense. Any questions on this one? Okay.
All right, so ADX Lite, similar in that the client still takes and transforms the data, but for probably a security reason, they don't want us in their system. So they will send it to a server, right, SFTP server. And of course, here I'm showing it in the client security boundary, but it could be on our side. It's one of those things, it's just a design decision that the data is pulled from the ERP, transformed, loaded onto this SFTP on a schedule that is communicated to us. And then Wayne and Ajay will set up jobs to pull that on that schedule and load it into Intuiflow. And then on a schedule by the client, we'll pull it back and send it to that SFTP for them to load into the ERP. So sometimes we see defense contract type people like this option because we're not actually touching the data.
Do you have any customers that are using different ERPs?
Oh, certainly.
And are they using a data lake or data warehouse that's the center and then two of those pulling in there? Or you have
So we have some of those as well. Yep. Yep. So I don't know the complete list, but certainly our team has integrated with Oracle, SAP, now NetSuite, as Szilard stole some of my presentation. Thank you, man. And a couple of others, also a data lake for one client and Salesforce. Yeah.
And there's one other one that we don't have a slide on it, but we do offer an on-prem version. So for those folks that are in military aerospace, where that's a requirement, where you can't have any of your information in the cloud, that is also available. So something for the back of your mind.
This is an integrations, right? We're talking integrations. There's no integration with that wall. Stop selling.
Okay, all right. I can't help it. I can't help it. Call me.
80 yeah, that's right.
That is true. That is true.
So ADX Full is our like full service premium option where we, through some permissions given to us by the client, connect directly to their ERP. We use Microsoft Azure, and they have plugins that we use and start with, and then we have our own scripts that go and pull the data for whichever ERP that we're plugging into. While I just mentioned a couple of them, we've got some standard scripts that we use to pull that data. Like we know that Mara is a big table in SAP, right? That's where some data lives, some master data. So we've got that all set up. I would say we're somewhere in the 70 to 80% on the standard ERPs of plug and play. It's never plug and play. Anybody thinks they've seen a standard implementation of software, I'd like you to show it to me. I did SAP for years, and it was standard right up until the time we contacted our client organization, right? We went in with, I worked for a large consumer products manufacturer, and we were SAP only, right? Stay standard. And that lasted really about a week. And then it was like, oh, well, we've got this exception because we're unique, right? Everybody's unique, just like everybody else. So in this case, we own the whole integration end to end. So if anything goes wrong, right, we can track it down, trace it, and tell you where it broke down, how it broke down, how we're going to keep it from breaking down again. So I like this option or the self-service options the most because they're the most transparent as to where an issue might arise, where we have that intermediate step. If something breaks, now we've got two places to go look, right on the client side and on our side. So that's Dan's perspective, not DD Tech's. So I'll just put an asterisk on that. And then we have plugins. We call them connectors for D365. We have one for the F&O side and a separate one for BC, Business Central, sorry. And so they are, just like it sounds, connectors. It embeds in their environment. There's some configuration that gets done to point it to the site that we have set up for them. There's some ability for the client to do the scheduling in that tool, and it just does the connection for them. So it's very straightforward for the D365 guys.
Yeah, from a level of effort within these options, you touched on it a little bit regarding ADX Full versus self-service. Can you nail that down a little more?
Sure. So self-serve, 100% on the client. When we move to the other two, it's increasingly less, right? So when you go into the ADX Lite, right, they do have to build that integration, get it to the FTP server, and then we manage that in and out. So slightly less work on their side. On the ADX Full, Wayne is spending a lot of time. There's a little time up front from the ITs because we need to know which fields to map to, right? Because we are doing field level mapping. So it's right. Right, you grab the table and the field and it lands in this table in this field in Intuiflow. So it's very much a limited effort in telling us what to do, and then Wayne or the J goes and codes that, and right then we go into data validation and testing it. So,
and then which one is the most popular or common option that we're seeing with our clients?
actually self-serve, and not by just a little bit. In fact, I would say there's probably at least 3 clients in this room that are self-serve as I look around. So it's very popular because they have the control, right? And they can see and do it. It's not hard to set up. I mean, you have to have a little technical skill, but you only have to do it once, and then it's right, just a scheduling issue.
What are the most common, I guess, support tickets that customers are seeing if they are self-serve? So we set it up, that requires X amount of time, and then ongoing for maintenance, something, you know, the data, the fields aren't mapping or the integration didn't run. Like what's the level of effort required for that? Is that a couple of hours a week? Do they have a full person that's just dedicated to
Can you hand the mic to Wayne?
Yeah.
Because he can probably answer that better than I can.
Yeah, so once we actually get it set up, they're pretty, unless something's really changing. I mean, if you do an upgrade and all of a sudden, you know, now there's new options available inside of Intuiflow, you may say, okay, well, now we want to go back and fill these fields in. Definitely not like hours per week. Once we get it set up, it's generally, it just cranks through because not much changes generally.
I'll say in 3 years, the only time we've had issues with daylight savings time. Well, I think we've got that figured out.
Great question. So Dan, any ERPs that we are not able to connect to that we're aware of?
Not that we're aware of, Wayne, that's correct. Have we come up against one we couldn't connect to?
Generally, we can find a way. So even if we can't connect, you know, there's all kinds of options in different ERPs. Some of them have APIs. So, you know, we can go and grab data through an API. We can, if we have access to the SQL Server, you know, if it's running on SQL Server, we can go in there, even though, you know, from our standpoint, we don't even know what ERP it is. We just see data and map it and grab it. I'm not sure that I know of any that we've tried to go down that path and then realize that we couldn't do it. We can usually find a way.
I appreciate the transparency. And then, of course, Solar stole the thunder on this one, but
Yes. Yeah. As Eric mentioned, as well as he took part of our presentation, we got a client going live on Monday in this exact scenario. Another one lined up in just a few months. So.
Yeah, it was interesting too, from a marketplace standpoint. Eric was talking about the NetSuite customer base, and it's, I think, becoming more attractive also for folks that are in NetSuite, but are a very sophisticated business or organization where you do have that path or that roadmap if you wanted to add scheduling and execution, explore demand planning. And I think that separates us from a lot of the competition in the NetSuite supply chain space. So.
The context of this question is that I have a NetSuite integrator that's like, no, you don't need other tools. NetSuite has a module for that. So what were some of the features that Intuiflow has that NetSuite customers really liked over whatever, you know, native modules NetSuite was offering?
I don't think we have enough time to cover
Yeah,
that. There's a big gap there.
I'll schedule some time with
Yes.
you. Wally.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. And
Wally can speak firsthand. Wally was director of material planning and supply chain at Red Digital Cinema out in California. And Wally, why don't you tell them your story?
yeah,
Because this
sure.
was early days for our NetSuite solution.
Yeah, I shared some of this at dinner the other night, but so like Eric said, highly complex manufacturing environment. They just got purchased by Nikon. I was there almost 10 years. An ERP swap had been selected by the executive group. We were currently running Microsoft Dynamics. NetSuite had been selected. very, very quickly. We identified a lot of gaps from a manufacturing standpoint, everything from BOM visibility to just basic volume of work orders that needed to be processed. So I had come across DD Tech, and the product was called Replenishment Plus at the time. But I would say the biggest thing is from an end user standpoint that you've seen through the presentations the past couple of days is gaining better visibility and being able to action things quickly. And I think in my experience in the NetSuite space, that was impossible. It just was not geared for bills of materials that had 1,000 items on them, if you include circuit boards and stuff like that. So, but I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. And then, yeah, we mentioned this a little bit, or AJ was talking about Salesforce, but so what other software can Intuiflow connect to?
So I know that some clients have connected to MES systems. I know, Craig, you've done some interesting work on your side. With QuickBooks.
Excel. We can do Excel.
Yeah. Wait,
No, believe me, we can do Excel.
yeah, we can. Because we have APIs, you can connect to.
Do you do that through Dynamics Excel connectors, and like, can you bring it all together?
Well, there's on the very basic end, we had in the early days some very small clients that were like at the QuickBooks stage of ERP evolution, right? And they didn't have their supply chain data in QuickBooks, so they had it in Excel workbooks, and they were able to simply
makes me
import CSV.
happy.
Yeah, simply import CSV files up that way, right?
That's really
Yeah. One of the neat things though about this Azure Data Factory environment is that they also have certified connectors called an integration runtime for various ERPs, which is like an agent you install into the client ERP like SAP. You give it access to the right tables and fields that you want that integration pipeline to have access to. And then it helps with all the other legs of the pipeline where we do the transforms to make it fit our solution and back again, right? So pretty cool stuff. And as I was mentioning earlier, we've done this now many, many times where we saw a unique requirement that we didn't have the functionality for, but we could address it through integration scripts. And one of the ones for this client that we're talking about here, they're a printed circuit board manufacturer. Part of their process is they have the ability to stack layers of circuit boards over top of each other for the drilling operations where all the circuit connections are going to be made through. It's a concept called derived units. Well, if you don't have the logic for this, you don't have an easy way to establish what the run rate through that step in the routing will be. And so Wayne's developed the logic that allows us to then calibrate a work order specific run rate for that step in the routing that allows them to achieve, accuracy in terms of what that derived units step in the process is. So there's lots of examples like that, not that we're looking for a lot of complexity here, but the interesting thing about it is that it does provide a way to evaluate and gain better understanding of what functionality do we really need. And then we can build that into the software feature now because we've got a valid business case or a story that we can build from, right? Make sense?
Ongoing maintenance, what's required? We talked about it a little bit, or there's a question about it, but
Yeah, so I assume this has to do with when they sign up, there's a line that says maintenance.
yeah, correct.
Yeah, okay. So that covers, so in those integrations, we have an environment that the integration lives in. And so that fee covers that environment being there, and then the work to maintain that environment and upgrade it and keep it in solid state. Right, so that accounts for a few hours of Wayne and Jay's time to keep that environment going.
Okay. Yeah, and this is another one that we're seeing, I think, especially in today's environment. So as far as if we're adding new sites, doing acquisitions, what would be involved if we wanted to bring on a different facility that wasn't in the environment currently?
So in some cases, of course, it's going to depend on the integration. Of course, if it's self-serve, they don't even need to tell me, right?
Sure.
If it's one of the other options, then it could be as simple, depending on the way the integration is built, as Wayne just including it in the select, right? Really, you just reach out to us, right? And we'll be able to tell you how long that will take for us to accomplish. But generally, it's not a big thing if you're adding a site, probably more on the sales side, because you guys want to get credit for that.
We do. Yeah, and I think this is also, so as I know there's very large organizations in the room, and we come across organizations that have, this one's running a dated version of SAP. Rita mentioned in her presentation yesterday of just the level of systems and tools that are out in the marketplace, and then being able to be agnostic to any of that, I think also is helpful, right? So you don't necessarily have to reinvest in an ERP swap if you're picking up different buildings and different organizations. So
yeah, so the second part of that, who should we contact? That would just be create a ticket, which I'll show you guys in a little bit how we do that.
now, not considering the differing migratory patterns, which swallow, either African or European, could fly a 1 pound coconut to Britain.
Are you checking if I'm awake or if they're awake? I believe there was a documentary, mid-70s, where this was addressed. And my understanding is that a 5-ounce European swallow can't possibly do it, but the African swallow maybe.
Any Monty Python fans in the room? Okay, all right. Couple more for you. Okay, yeah, and this was also asked, I think, from the back of the room. Is the customer alerted if an integration fails? What happens? Do bells go off?
Nothing happens. We don't have those. What actually happens in the real world is that an email gets generated, sent to the client, probably to Wayne and Ajay directly, saying, "Hey, this is failed," and then they can go dig into that.
Okay. Yeah, if I was curious about the APIs that are available, where would I be able to look?
Yeah, so the APIs, of course, we have many of them. They're in Intuiflow. You can navigate directly to them. So you go to settings and, and then accounts and access. You click that, then you're going to go down to this API access tokens and click it. And then in the red box there, API documentation. When you click that, now you go to the next screen. And so it shows you all of the APIs that are available. So you can see, right, the get, put, post. For many items, we've now organized them a little bit better than they were in previous versions, so you can kind of target where you're going much easier. We use these a lot internally for testing and trying new things, right? The company's always inventing new functionality, and so we then have to help test that. And so Miles actually developed for us a bit of a tool so that we could take and load data very quickly, extract data very quickly. It's very useful. So if you guys use APIs, it's wonderful. They keep expanding it. I'll let Patrick tell you how much he's going to expand it, but it's pretty powerful.
You don't want to steal some of his thunder?
No, I will not.
Yeah, we get asked this one a lot too. So, can I hold and maintain master data like bills of materials and routes and modify them within Intuiflow as opposed to doing it in the ERP system?
Mostly, yes. So you can load it there. We had one client who wanted to be able to do RCCP, but the standards were changing in their ERP system. And so they just flat file loaded it into Intuiflow and then used that for their capacity planning. Interestingly enough, about 6 months later got a ticket submitted for why our routing's not changing because we've changed the standard, and I had to kindly explain you guys chose to just upload one file. But that was also then an opportunity for them later we presented to them the option to integrate that file as well.
Very cool.
So it can be stored there. What we probably don't want to do though is make that the system of record, right? For planning, it's okay, but you don't want to push that stuff back to ERP.
Okay. This is another good one that we hear all the time. So is there a limit to the number of times that an integration can run?
Absolutely. So technically, no. Wayne could set the jobs up to run right? Hundreds of times a day. But the reality is at some point you're kicking off MRP jobs, that's slowing down the system, people can't use it. So what we see pretty commonly is single or maybe 2 times a day, you're upgrading, updating enough data that drives the MRP run. There may be other data like scheduling and execution data that you would update more frequently because it's not kicking off those runs, slowing down other users. So I would say on the materials planning side, 2 or 3 times. We had one client tried to go to 4. They contacted us and said that we'd like to go back to 2.
Yeah, any creative integrations that we've done that kind of jump out as what would be possible if someone wanted to explore something unique or?
Sure. Well, of course, Eric touched on the derived units that we're doing for a client right now that's doing some math in the integration to set up the system based on their customer requirements. Before we had it in the product, we had auto approve, but it would only run 1 time a day. We had clients though that had very large bills of materials, very deep. And so for that to play out for them, it would take a week of auto approve for everything that needed to be approved that day. So we did in the integration, create multiple auto approvals to meet that need. Of course, Patrick has fixed that. We don't need to do that in the integration anymore, but that's another example. I mean, there's not necessarily a logical limit to what we could do in it, but there's probably a practical limit where at some point you become too brittle of an integration. But I don't think we're quite there yet, are we, Wayne?